Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the FTD virtual design show titled Picture Perfect, featuring Suzie Kostick, AIFD. We are excited to welcome Suzie live today from her home in New Mexico as she demonstrates how to create floral designs that look as good in photographs as they do in person. As a quick housekeeping note, Suzie will be taking questions during the session. If you have a question for her, simply type it in the chat box in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. All right, let's get started. Welcome, Suzie.
Hello, Janet, and everyone joining us this afternoon. I'm really happy that you're taking a few minutes, 30 minutes, or maybe 45 minutes out of your afternoon to join FTD and myself as we bring this informative workshop to you today. So thanks for joining us. And since we want to be mindful of your time, let's go ahead and get started right now. And remember, if you do have a question at any time, just go ahead and type it in there and Janet will let me know because we want to make sure that all your questions are answered. So photography, yeah, it's a big thing right now. And quite honestly, it's the best time for being able to photograph your work than ever before. Years and years and years ago, we used to have to get a really good camera and learn how to use it. And really it was a big chore. And now with the phones, with these amazing cameras in it, really being able to capture picture-worthy, Instagram-worthy photographs is easier than it's ever been before. And all you really need is just a few tricks and tips on how to create your design so that they photograph well, they look that Instagram-worthy that we're all looking for, but yet they still are good, solid designs. So we're going to go ahead and start off with this design here. And excuse me when I lean over because I just want to make sure that you can see it. And this is not completed yet, but it's very, what we would say on trend. It's a style right now, that relaxed, romantic, garden style is very, very popular. And we're seeing a lot of it. And if you go to anybody's Instagram pages or you go to Pinterest, you're going to see a lot of this style. And quite honestly, this is a really easy style to photograph. And the reason being is that because the style itself is very abundant and very full, you don't have to be as precise with your placements. And what I mean by that is in most photography, you will find that when you're looking at your arrangement and you see it and you love the design, but then you go to take a picture and it's like, well, that's not what my design looked like to me. Keep in mind that you're looking at a picture in one dimension where we see the design in 3 dimensions. So any holes, any spaces, any voids are really going to be amplified in a photograph where they're not amplified because our mind's eye fills in the blanks. The camera can't do that. Even with the technology we have today, it still can't fill in the blanks. So this style of design, because it usually is very abundant, has a lot of flowers, and has a lot of depth, it's kind of an easy design to capture. But a few tricks and tips for creating this style design so that you're going to be sure that you get the right angles and the right opportunities to really encompass a beautiful full design. We're going to kind of complete the arrangement together so that you can see what it's missing and how it looks a little better. And a little prelude to what next week's webinar is going to be, all the designs that I'm creating today, I'm going to photograph, and I'm going to photograph them incorrectly as well as correctly. So if you join me next week, you'll be able to see the difference from what you're seeing here today in live me creating it, and then also what it looks like in a photograph, which is wrong or maybe not so pretty and photographed well. So I hope that you join us next week as well. So you'll see in this design, this is definitely the front, and I'll turn it slowly around, and it definitely has a back to it. Now keep in mind, when you're designing your arrangements, what are you going to be using it for? Is it an order that has to rush out the door really quick? Because if you're doing that, if you want to photograph a design that you're sending out the door for a delivery, you're not going to design it the same way as you would for a styled photo shoot or even a studio shoot. So keep in mind what you're designing it for and give yourself some grace that if it's going out the door for a customer, it's not going to be designed quite the same way as if all you're doing the design is for a photo shoot, because you can kind of manipulate your placements of where your flowers go in a design that's only going to be meant for photography. And everybody does it. It's an old trick that before we had all the extras of Photoshop and all the filters that are available nowadays, we actually had to make the design in a way that it would photograph almost perfectly within the shot and print film. And now we can manipulate things after the arrangement is made. But I always believe that if you can do it right the first time, it just really saves time on the end. So one of the things I want to point out, and whenever you're designing just for photography, not necessarily for a gift or something that's going to be sent to a customer, is consider your container. You want to be able to see the container, especially if you're using a container that has a pattern, or it has a relief on it, or it has some kind of color and texture that you want to incorporate into the design. It's not just a vessel that's holding the stuff, it's actually part of the overall composition, and you want to make sure that you're capturing it properly in the photograph. So when I'm designing just for photography, I always make sure, and you'll see in some of the other arrangements that I'm going to be showing as well, I always make sure that I leave an emphasis, almost a blank spot, so that the container will be seen. And then as I'm designing, I've got a lot of depth. And again, this style of arrangement, it makes it really easy because depth is part of the style. So I have a lot of ins real tight to the container and outs. And this also allows for the color and the depth to really be captured in the photograph. The trick here, because this is just for photography, this isn't a customer order, is that I don't have to completely design all the way around. I can design it more three-sided. I wouldn't say one-sided, because you want to make sure it has that depth. You also want to make sure that you're designing from multiple angles. So it's not just a front view photograph. You're designing so that if you want to come and get an interesting angle from the top or from the side, that the arrangement will look complete. So I've got some backwards here, insertions. In this container here, I'm actually designing, I'm not designing in foam in this container, I'm designing in a wire armature. I actually use the wire armature that is available through Smithers Oasis. And I just use that, much like people use the chicken wire or they use the Holly Chapel egg. I just prefer something softer and easier to manipulate. And I find that the wire armature works really well for providing that same kind of armature structure down in my design. So I've got some of these little ball chrysanthemums, and they're bringing a light texture and depth into this side of the design. Now I need to go back over here and balance it as well. And I've used some very pale yellow roses with a pop of orange. So I want to bring a little more pop of color to it, because color in photography in your designs is really what makes them stand out. Monochromatic designs are a little harder to design, or to photograph, I mean, than multicolor, because you really have to make sure your lighting is proper and the depth is proper. Otherwise, the arrangement will have a flat look to it. And again, I'm not going completely, I'll turn this around, I'm not going completely out this way like I would on a horizontal line like I would if I were designing this for a customer's home. I'm designing it just slightly so that from the front view, the rose can be seen. From a angled side view, the rose can be seen from both angles. But I don't need to waste product to do a complete whole design if it's not meant to be for a customer. If it's really just for the purpose of a photo shoot, then conserve your money, conserve your budget, and learn how to design where it appears to be a full all the way around arrangement, and it doesn't necessarily have to be. We'll just add a little more texture with this fresh lavender. I actually just cut that out of my garden this morning. And then we also have some chamomile. That'll add a nice little texture. And again, remember I said that this design is really easier to photograph than designs that have really distinct lines or distinct forms and shapes to them, because this is meant to be a very relaxed style. As long as you fill in the voids and you have the front to back depth, it can be captured in a one-dimensional photograph.
Question, Susie.
Yes.
So you said you're designing not for this to go out to the door to a customer. If you were designing this in your shop though, would they like do this, create the design, and then can you like add some more, like finish the back or whatever to then sell in your shop and send out?
You absolutely can. Most definitely. I don't want you to waste flowers or waste time in arrangements. I mean, if you can sell it, certainly. But there seems to be, you know, a lot of people will, it's hard to stop when you're working in a busy day, filling orders, to take photographs of your designs. And although you should be, and we'll talk about this more next week, you should be doing that. Have a little space set up where you can photograph things that are going out the door. There's a different way to photograph them than something that you're creating just for a photo shoot. So, and a lot of times, because you'll be creating, you would want to do, for budgetary reasons, you would want to do multiple arrangements for a photo shoot. If you're going to set it up or have a space or set up a backdrop and all that, you want to make use of your time. You don't want to do onesies. So this particular design is based on the fact that we were going to be doing multiple arrangements and photographs. Chances are they're going to be more stressed because they're sitting out. You're going to be kind of turning them, manhandling them a little bit more than you would something going out the door. I know that sounds kind of contradictory to what we do, but believe me, when you've been on photo shoots, you realize that you'll do things like, okay, when you're looking in the camera, this rose needs to be pulled out more. So you'll pull it out and maybe it's not in the water, but it's okay for the photograph. And then you put it aside, you forget to push it back down in the water. So that's the reason behind that. And again, I said, I don't want to go too far into it because we're going to be talking about this next week, but you could absolutely come back in, fill it all the way in. And quite honestly, even though I'm designing it this way, that it's mainly a front, it could be, it's not unfinished in the back. I never design anything that's not moderately finished that I wouldn't be able to give to somebody. It's just, it may not be completely finished in the back, if that makes any sense. So just adding a few more of the balsams and a little bit of that lavender to bring that pop of color up here to kind of, you can kind of see, I hope you can, it's hard for me to see because my phone's far away, that it has a lot of depth. And so for this design, again, I have enough of my container showing so that color will be picked up in different angles of the photograph. It's going to look like the arrangement's just floating. And then it has lots of color and lots of depth. All right. Are there any questions for this arrangement? All right, moving on. I need about 6 more places to put things. Okay. It feels good to be surrounded by flowers, that's for sure. I don't know, I haven't been working with them for a while, so it feels really good. So now here we have another example of kind of a garden style, more relaxed style. Again, something that you'll see quite often posted to Instagram. It's a combination of different botanicals, the sunflowers, the veronica. We have stock, we have the balsams, and I also picked some licorice from my garden just to give it that real natural feel. I'm going to turn this forward a little bit. Now, this is a lower design that we're creating. And this is going to give you a lot of interest because of the length. And it's going to give you a lot of different options when you're photographing it of how to place it. So I'm thinking in advance, again, how do I want to, I don't want to just a front, blunt, front on kind of photograph. I want something that's going to give it a little bit of movement. Even though it's one-dimensional, you want the eye to follow the flowers through the design. You don't want it to just stop on the page. And so one way to do that is your placement of your flowers. The second way to do that to help reinforce your placement of the flowers is the angles in which you're going to photograph it. So you've got to keep those things in mind when you're designing. And that's why I think it's really important to determine, am I just, is this just an arrangement that's going to be used for delivery that I just thought was really, really cool, and I want to make sure that I get a photograph of it? You're going to photograph that a little differently than something that is in a lifestyle shoot or a studio shoot or a style photo shoot. That's going to have the character. That's where it's going to bring to life. And that's kind of where we're focusing on right now, because I think that's really where you get the big meat and those really kind of cool, moody, images that everybody's wanting to get. So clear this off here. All right, so we have some sunflowers. I want to add a few more. And again, I'm going to design it so that from the front, most of the flowers are going to be visible. Not that they're not going to be visible from the back, but you can kind of see here how my back is flat. It's flatter, where the front has more depth coming over. I once again made sure that there was like this little off-center cutout here where the container is almost in full view. You can see over here where I broke what we call that baseline, where the arrangement meets the container. You always want to soften that line by bringing something over. But in this case, because of the photography, we want to make sure that we leave just a little peak, a little more of an area where we can see the container. So in photography, we can get that texture of the wood of this container into that design. And I'm doing this in a very small camera. So we'll see how good I am at this, at designing in a little tiny backwards view.
Looks great so far.
Okay, that's what I want to hear. And another thing, again, I'm not here to promote products, but if you're designing with foam, I highly recommend using the midnight foam for photographs. Green foam in photographs it really sticks out. You really, really, really notice it. And certainly you don't want to get done with your photo shoot and then find out, oh my goodness, look at all the green foam. Now, certainly if you have a Photoshop pro that works in your shop, that's not a problem. But if it's just you and you're not a pro at it, you're going to have a problem, and you're going to have a wasted design. And so the midnight foam, I highly recommend it because it will disappear completely in the photographs. You will not see it. So it's a big advantage to that. So now I'm adding some hypericum, some red hypericum. Be careful with receding colors. I mentioned a little bit earlier about pops of color that help to add depth and texture. Certain colors, and I can see it in here, just in the reflection of the camera here. I've got this purple Veronica here, and I'm sure you can see it because it has movement in line, but the actual color of it is probably almost leaving like a little black hole. So we need to be aware that we don't want these dark receding colors like the reds and the purples or the dark eggplant colors to be put down inside the arrangement. We want to bring those up to the top. And if we can, base them or use a lighter color flower underneath it so that it really pops and sticks out. And you can see that's what I've done. I have some buttercream color stock here along with the ball chrysanthemum that the Veronica comes up over so that you will be able to see that. You might not be able, because I realize that my phone has this like soap opera haze to it, so it's not crystal clear, but you'll be able to see it in the photographs that we show you next week if you can't make it out completely here. So I've added some of the red hypericum again, coming around to the back. It's not pointing out flat to the back, it's kind of pointing up. So when I look at the arrangement from the front and I come down to the level, and I will I move a lot when I design for photography because I want to see the different angles. I'm looking at it like, okay, how does it look this way? Does this flower need to face this way or does it need to face this way? Because I want it to be able to really shine in the arrangement. I want to be able to see it. So like, is that sunflower facing right? Is this sunflower, maybe it needs to come more that way so I can see its pretty little face in the photograph. And then I manipulate it before it gets on set, if possible. Okay, what else? I've got some beautiful stuff here. What do I want to add to it now? How about all these beautiful orange roses? I love the orange roses, and they're light enough that I can bury a couple down in to give me that depth and texture. And these are opening up so beautifully. So I still want to make sure that I have a soft blend or a soft bleed between where the container stops and the arrangement starts. So that's something you want to be on the lookout for, depending on where you're photographing the design from, is does your container and your arrangement blend, or does it just look like you plopped some flowers on top of a container? So even though I'm leaving this space open here so the container can be seen, I have something down in. I use that beautiful orange rose tucked close down to the foam and to the edge of that container so that it's not really covering that spot, but it's enhancing it. It doesn't look like there's a line where the container stops and the arrangement ends. So you can see now that arrangement will be beautiful photographed this way, this way, this way, and that way. So I have lots of different great angles based on the flower placement to get different views of the different flowers. Okay, how are we doing on time? Oh, good. We're doing really good on time.
Twyla loves that one, Susie.
Who does?
Twyla.
Oh, Twyla. Hi, Twyla, my dear friend Twyla. Twyla is my health coach as well. So it's good that she's on here. I know she just came back from a big convention, so I'm glad she made time to be with us. Okay. Oh, that's the one I just did. I'm going to say that one looks done to me. Here we go. I want this one. Okay. It's a little different form. Something that's going to be more vertical, parallel. I don't know. I'm going to get rid of that little. I'm not used to working on a turntable. I don't know. Some of you, I see a lot of designers working on turntables now, and I thought I'd give it a shot, but it just doesn't work for me. So vertical arrangement, something to keep in mind if you're doing photography of vertical arrangements is that if the vertical line is not very, very clean, it will be exaggerated. The messiness of it, or one little stem coming too far over, will be amplified in a photograph. So be very careful to look at the design as you're creating it. And what, again, remember I said earlier that our mind's eye is able to kind of correct or fill in the blanks. Well, the camera can't do that. It can't think. So when you're looking at something, and honestly, now we really have the advantage. Before, when we used to have a camera, and even before we had the little, the little screen on the back, the only thing you could see the arrangement through was the viewfinder. And although I'm glad we don't have to do that anymore, I'm really glad that I had to learn how to do that, because you see the arrangement very clearly, and where your holes or where your lines are dissecting each other where they shouldn't be. But you can do a couple things. The old-fashioned way is just take a little piece of paper and cut out like a 5x7 square, or you could just go get a, one of those little photo mats or whatever, and have that. And this is how we used to do it back in the day. And you would take this and you hold it to the arrangement and look at it. And although you're still seeing dimensionally, it does kind of keep into frame and focus. It makes more clear where your little boo-boos are, where you need to clean it up a little bit, or where you need to like trim or cut back. You can do that also with your phone now. Just by pointing the phone at it and looking at it on the screen, you're going to see it in one dimension. So you're going to see the dark spots. You're going to see where the line is dissecting or maybe swaying to the right or to the left a little bit too much. So that's a little trick that you can do prior to getting. So in this case, I can see just even on is that I've got some crossing lines here that I want to clean up with my eucalyptus and my roses. And I even think if I look that I have two flowers right here that are like stacked right next to each other. And a lot of this is just a good way to think about it is if you know your elements and principles and you practice them and you do them really well, they're amplified in a photograph. So if your line is off, it's going to be amplified. If your balance is off, it's going to be amplified. So everything that you do as far as an elements or principle has to be extra clean or extra well done in a photograph for it to, especially in a more technical arrangement, so that you get the clean lines and the actual look that you're going for. So I'm going to come in here and trim this down because that was competing. Put that to the back there and move that so I have a cleaner line right here. And I purposely did it so that you could see the difference. Now I have more of a gap. It's cleaner here. So my two parallel lines will be very crisp and clean and obvious in the photograph. Any questions so far? Good. That means
No. Just got a
understanding what
comment
I'm
about
saying.
great tips.
Good. All right. I should be doing it this way, but some designs you just gotta. Now you'll notice I am putting something a little bit more to the back here, and it's because of the design style as to why I'm filling it into the back, because you're going to be able to see that in the photograph, especially if I do something from the top. I want it to look completed, and I need to emphasize. Maybe it comes right here so I can see it a little bit better. There we go. Now I can see it better. I placed it here. It kind of is a pavade on the back of the design, but again, it's just visible. The color is just visible enough from the front that it helps strengthen the line of the roses. Again, keeping it very clean so that I don't lose my line.
We've got a couple of questions, Susie, that just popped in.
Yes.
That is the Midnight Oasis that you're using?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Can you see it?
What? Yeah, I can see it.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have another question. What color backdrop should they be using, or should it be outside, or is that part of next week's session?
It is part of next week's because it's a multi-layered answer. I would love to be able to just give one blanket answer, but to kind of spike pique your interest, if you're going to have to do something as neutral as possible. So white works really great, and it's the easiest to photograph on, or a very soft eggshell color would be best. And we'll talk about what types of background as far as material goes and how to set that up next week. Adding some Veronica here. The Veronica has a definite curve to it. So I'm placing it in a way where it's supported so that it has more of an upright, except when it comes to the front, then I want some depth and I want some movement. So I'm letting it's still very vertical and linear in its placement, but the natural arch of it is arching forward so that it doesn't disrupt, again, this vertical line, the space here that we need to have in that design. I forgot where I put everything.
Melody said the Midnight Oasis foam looks like dirt to her, which I was thinking the exact same thing. It's like a little garden effect.
Ah, well, that's good. That is good. That is good. That's good. Let's see. I'm looking for something. Oh, here it is. These beautiful, yummy hydrangeas. I will have to say that the Midnight Foam is really it's such a great design tool. It, you know, as well as it being a great mechanic, it really just offers so many creative opportunities with designing. Like you said, it looks like soil, like dirt. So I easily could, if I would, this is all pieced together. I'll be very transparent. This is all just pieced together. It's little pieces I had left over. But if I had one nice clean brick in there, and that it was wedged snug enough in there, I probably would just take a rose stem or some kind of willow stem or something and wedge it between the container to hold the foam in as a natural product, and then design that way. I wouldn't even need tape if it's wedged in there well enough. But it allows you, it gives you that flexibility, which is really cool. Okay, we're gonna finish it off with some Hypericum.
And while you're finishing that, I got another question. Do you have any tips on photographing funeral arrangements like wreaths or sprays, since they can be kind of large?
Yeah, it is harder, and you need a bigger space in order to do it. It comes down to having the space to do it. Especially if you're just photographing the items that you're creating for orders. If you can, I mean, if you're photographing for your website or you're photographing for selection guides that you want to offer the local funeral homes, I would highly recommend getting a relationship with them and asking them if they'll let you come in and photograph in their building in an actual setting. That's ideal. But if it's just the stuff that you have on a daily basis, we'll talk about space. Oh, I just broke that flower. You need the space because that's half the trick of getting the right angle and where to stand and how to photograph it. And we'll cover that next week. But it all comes down to space, really. That's the trick, is having the space. Because it's just another arrangement. So how you stand, where you place your camera, how you light it is all the same. Doesn't matter. But once you know how to position it in front of the camera and you have the space and where to stand, you'll have great success. Okay. There's that little arrangement. You can see that the vertical lines, oh, that one doesn't want to stay. The vertical lines are very clean. You have that negative space that emphasizes the vertical line. And then we have the lighter color towards the bottom to help offset the darker color on top. And that's going to be a fun one to photograph. So you'll have to join us next week to see how that turns out in the different settings.
I can't wait for next week, man.
I know. Okay. How are we doing on time? Pretty good. I can finish this last one. And I just mainly put this together again to show you it's not quite, again, here we have a yellow container that has this kind of like a honeycomb pattern on it. And so when you're having something that has an interesting pattern or an interesting color, remember I said you don't want to cover it up. So you can see a little clearer how much I've left open. Yet I have this nice hanging down here with the seeded eucalyptus, and I have some seeded eucalyptus over here. So let's finish it and I'll show you what it's going to, and this is going to be a really full arrangement once I get done. Let me do this so I can design faster. And this is going to be like an order, right? This is an order going out of the shop. Delivery man's waiting. But I just love this color, and I don't have a lot of this color on my website, so I know that I want to photograph it. What am I thinking as I'm making it? I'm thinking, okay, what do I really want to stand out and pop? What's going to be my story about this arrangement as I'm creating it so that I can, you know, we already know that it's an anniversary arrangement that's a customer ordered, right? But what's my story that I want to tell on my social media page or on my website. This is the story of roses. I'm going to use all roses in this. And I've got the spray roses, and I've got the beautiful orange, soft, kind of orangish rose. And again, go ahead.
We've got a question about, Amber said she knows you're cutting your hydrangea up into small pieces. Does it last like that?
Absolutely. It absolutely does, and it absolutely lasts in foam as long as it was treated properly when you get it, meaning, process it properly. I know that there's a lot of people who will use alum with it, and I know that works really well. I don't know why I just don't. I've always had great success just using, the quick dip and then the express product, the no cut product to process the flowers, which is what I did here. Processed everything yesterday, and mind you, I'm in New Mexico and it's very dry here. Hydrangeas really get stressed in New Mexico easy because it is so dry and it literally just sucks the moisture right out of the petals. But with the proper care and handling, it's no matter if it's cut from the main stem or from the smaller little stems, as long as it gets a water source, it's going to last really well for you. Okay, kind of change it up with these beautiful pink. And I do have one of the green hydrangeas in this design. It's kind of my base to cover some of the mechanics, the foam of the design. But you'll notice I'm making sure that each flower has its own space. That's really what's important. I'm not overlapping too many or getting them too close together when I'm placing it in there. If I have one here, I want one to come out a little bit more. So it sticks out a couple inches, and it's visually pleasing looking at it with my eye, because again, my eye's mind fills in the blanks. And it's going to be all the way around. I tend to design whenever I can with the foam below the baseline, as opposed to how I was taught all those years ago, where it had to be an inch or 2 inches above and then shave the edge. I've learned to design with it about 1/4 to an inch below the baseline, so everything looks like it's coming out of the arrangement. And that way I don't have to use as much product, especially foliage, to actually cover the mechanic, which means there's less for the camera to spy when it takes its picture. Okay, I want to be mindful again that, here's my front right here, that I'm leaving this spot almost, it's not a bare spot because I do have that blend over the container, but then I have a great mixture of color, and that it's not necessarily evenly dispersed, but it's not, all the pink is on one side and all the orange is on one side. Here I have this line of pink going through it, but it's separated enough that it doesn't create a visual pass, so it's not disrupting what's going on this side or this side of the arrangement. Remember, I told you earlier that all your elements and principles are amplified in a photograph, so make sure you have that balance. And if you need to, take out your phone, get it into the view and take a look to see if you got something that's to one side or not. And if you do, and the driver is there waiting for you to get the arrangement out the door, just turn it interestingly so that that line isn't boop, straight across, that the line more meanders. And so there's ways and tricks to place your arrangement and what angle you're photographing it from, so that you can kind of cover up some of your boo-boos, I guess is what I want to say. All right, just a few more of these beautiful antique spray roses.
While you're adding those roses, we have another question. Would you ever group 2 or 3 designs together for one picture?
Absolutely. That's a great thing to do. And normally when I do that, I have a thought in mind, whether it's going to be 3 complementary arrangements, a large, medium, and small, or some it's different designs where there'll be one vertical, one horizontal, one more round or oval, and then place them. And we can talk about that next week. I'll put that on my notes to talk about how you place them in the frame of the camera to best capture all three designs at once. So I'm glad you asked that question, whoever did. Thank you, thank you. All right, I think we're just about done here. We've got color. Yeah, that's my front right there. Do one more pink over here. And then I'm gonna come in with this really cool licorice plant just to soften it up a little bit and give it that romantic feel and texture. Just a couple stems in it. You can see I gotta find my front. Right there's my front. Right here's my front, where you still have it goes up a little higher. So depending, depending on where the arrangement is placed and where you're standing, we're gonna learn next week how to best photograph that to get its best angle. So I think that covers everything. Let's open it up for questions, Janet. Hopefully you got lots of questions for me.
Thanks, Suzie, for sharing your talent and your knowledge. This is awesome. Yes, we are. Thanks for the questions that have been coming in. We are open for any final questions before we close things out. As a reminder, just simply type it in the chat box. While we're giving people a chance for any final questions, can you give us a quick teaser for next week's follow-up webinar?
Yeah. We're not going to be designing, like I said earlier. We're actually going to. I'm going to be photographing these. So my work is still ahead of me. I get to photograph these. I'm going to hopefully photograph them in a few different ways, and we're going to talk about the different angles, the do's, the don'ts, the whys, the why nots, and really so that you actually. Okay, it's one thing to design it, but now you have to photograph it, and we want to make it easy, right? I'm not about ordering lots of expensive equipment. We want to keep it easy. Most of what you're going to learn is going to be able to be done with your phone. So, so that way you can save time, get the photographs you need for your website, for your social media, for your own selection guides, whatever you need. We want to make sure that we are setting you up for success. So hope that you will join us next week.
Great. Melody said, would you cover wedding as well? So I'm wondering if she just means like covering, like photographing some of your wedding pieces that you design, or.
Yeah, we can talk about that. If you have any specific questions about wedding, maybe shoot them in here, and then Janet can get them to me so that I make sure that I cover the specific questions you have, or maybe you just want to ask them now. I mean, while you're here, if you want to do that.
Yep, she said yes, wedding pieces was what she was talking about, photographing.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about, we'll go over styled photo shoots. What's the difference between a styled shoot, a lifestyle shoot, a studio shoot, and what I like to call, I don't really know the technical term, but I call it the selfie shoot, which is one of those, like, it's an impromptu, I need to take a picture of this right now, and make it beautiful kind of photography. So we'll be talking about the four different ones very briefly. Mainly my goal and our goal here is to get you equipped so that you're taking more pictures of your work so that you have more to use on your websites and your social media, and so that you're successful with it, so that you're happy with designing. I know everyone knows how to design and you're creating beautiful things. It really comes down to just a few tricks I went over today, and then knowing how to angle your camera, how to light it, and how to snap it.
Cool. We've got another question. What about using a ring light?
Yeah, you absolutely can. I'll put it to you this way. I'm one of these kind of designers that I never find time to photograph anything. If I'm out on a wedding setup, I know there's lots of, opportunities to take photographs, especially when it's all done in the setting. But I'm too busy running around, finishing things, picking stuff up, making sure the flower's okay, loading up the van. And I never remember or take the time because it's not front of mind for me. I'm not from the camera. generation. I'm from the camera around your neck generation, not the camera in your back pocket generation. So to me, I'm not one of those that it just comes naturally for me to stop and take photographs of everything I do. And I envy those people that I see out there that make the time, no matter what they're doing, and they will take 60, 70 different photographs of one of their arrangements. But reality is, if you're working at a flower shop and you're busy every day, which I know you are because the business has been really good, you don't have time to set up set up all that and have that going. Or maybe you don't even have the space. If you're one of those people that you have space where you can have a studio set up, a little mini studio set up all the time, or that you can, get the ring out and get it all up and set up on your camera on your phone, then we'll talk a little bit about that. But this really, I'm gearing it towards people who are snapping on the fly. You don't have time because you're busy. We still want you to be successful.
Great. We've got another question. When you take front and top shots of your arrangements, if you do 3-dimension flat at back, it won't be a good top shot. Is there any trick on this problem?
It's all in the angle. It really comes down to the angle, and this is one of those things, like I wish we had 3 hours and I wish I had a whole studio that I could walk around and show you. It really comes down to where you're standing and holding the camera, on how you're able to capture that so that even in 1 dimension, it gives a 3-dimensional look. And also then when you have that 1-dimensional photograph and you want to make it 3D on your, like on the social media where you have that option and that filter, it'll look beautiful, even more beautiful that way because it will transport it into that beautiful 3D.
Great. And we'll add some more stuff. That'll be a lot of what we're covering next week. Okay. Another question, do you add filters to your photos or you just try and keep it raw and natural?
Well, it's really hard not to when there's all these fun filters and things to do with it. But again, my background is in publishing, and we didn't have, even though we had Photoshop and we had the amazing graphic designers who could do just about anything with any photograph. If we saw we were missing a flower, they could put another flower there. We always designed our pieces so that we could capture everything perfectly in the right color, in the right everything without having to alter it too much. When you start altering it, if you're trying to alter the color, it could get you in trouble. I hear a lot of that on Facebook where people are, especially photographers, are muting the colors of the arrangements, or they're putting these soft filters on things which give a different appearance to a flower. And then the bride's expectation or customer's expectation is this arrangement that looks filtered. And then when they get it in real life, it's not the same. So yes, it's fun to play with filters, and there's a right time and a wrong time. But I think in general, if you're building a website and a portfolio or, your social media, you need to have a really good balance of just real pretty designs that are naturally beautiful without all the filters and add-ons. Personal opinion.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and Debbie just said post-production's a pain, so it's much easier to try to get it right in the camera.
It is, yeah. Yes. If you don't have time to take photographs, you're not going to have time to do post-production, edits and filtering and all that. But unless you have, somebody in your shop that automatically has the camera with them all the time, and there are some shops that have that. So
yeah,
that's awesome.
Another question, and I don't know if this is more for next week or not, and if it is, we can keep that. What do you suggest if you're in an area with bad lighting? I feel like that might be part of next week's.
It might be part of next week's. It's again playing and understanding your equipment, but there are ways to kind of compensate that, especially depending on what you mean by bad lighting. So whoever asked that, I hope you join us because that's a good topic for conversation. And I think next week too, it'll be more conversational. So if you bring all those questions, Janet will get them to me, and I'll make sure that we cover all those topics so that you have some takeaways for it.
Great. All right. It looks like we're out of questions for today. Thanks everyone for joining us. A recording, as I've put in the chat, a few people are asking, a recording will be available on demand on the FTD Mercury Network Florist YouTube channel. And for more education programming from FTD, visit ftdi.com to register for the upcoming free webinars and design shows. as well as viewing past education programs on demand. Thanks,
Awesome.
everyone.
Thanks. Bye-bye.